So recently I've been watching a lot of Mind Pulp on YouTube, and I came across a video that they made on the 8th of March 2021 where they were playing the Mr. Bean game for the ps2, and it's terrible. So I thought to myself, geez, I can make a better Mr. Bean game than that. So I did. Sort of. So the first thing was that I had to get the actual models for the game, so I managed to get them from model resources, and I realised that the Mr. Bean that they had wasn't quite angry enough. Definitely not as angry as I remember him from the TV show. I started by changing his face about that and then cleaning up some of his assets. Once I was happy with that, I imported them back in the Blender and realised that the face just used the same topology on both sides for the UVs. So I had to fix that as well, completely change where the UVs were situated, clean it up a bit, change the mesh just slightly so it better suited to proportions that I was after. Once I was happy with that, I started to rig the character. That was easy enough. Brought in my rig from my other game, just connected all the points where I needed, meshed him together with the rig, made sure all that worked still, and I was ready to move on to some slight animations. Import him into Unity and threw on those textures just to make sure he looked actually half decent in the game engine itself. Right, so the next thing then was to add in some simple animation. So I started with this simple crouch animation where basically he's cupping his hands together and kind of dipping. It doesn't really make sense, but I just needed something to throw in. Then I just used the old walk animation, slightly altered them, that I had for my character that was on the rig already. So you can see I'm just cleaning up some animation keys here. And I made him look more kind of afraid. Just changed the animation slightly, brought them back into Unity, connected everything in Unity to make sure that everything was still working fine. Altered the animations, removed some redundant animation files. So I brought them into Unity, tested them, and finally I was happy enough with how that was looking out. Finally I downloaded this toon shader from the asset store and it looks quite good. It definitely got the job done for what I was after anyway. So next, I had to basically establish what I wanted the game to be about. So I picked the episode Double Trouble from Mr. Bean, where basically he discovers that he is not the only version of him and that there is another exact lookalike who we eventually find out is an alien from another planet, has a spaceship and everything. But basically it was just this scene where they're on the park bench that I was basing it off, and you have to fight the other Mr. Beans. So once I had that idea, I just basically brought it into Photoshop, got the color scheme of what I needed, so I could remake the scene in Blender. Once I had that color pattern all done, I started to recreate the park bench from the scene itself. Once I was happy with how that was looking, I decided to jump back into Photoshop and actually create the riveted look that the park bench has. Now, so I just had to fix the topology so the actual thing lined up with the texture itself, and export that into Unity to make sure that looks okay, and give it the toon shader as well. Change some of the topology a little bit just so it wasn't quite straight. Next was adding the background environment, so I just added a simple plane for the ground and started to extrude up some uneven terrain then for the back area, for the grass. Then I just started to work on the trees. Basically I just created a square, added some cuts, and then use the line tools to give it a circle, extruded up some branches essentially, give it its color. Once it had its color and I was happy enough with the positioning of the trees, I started to work on the shrubbery. Basically just a couple of geospheres all connected together. Just messed around with their topology, brought them into the sculpting version, or the sculpting mode, and remeshed the entire topology of it and smoothed it out. So basically once I was happy with that, I gave it its color, cleaned up its topology, and brought it back into Unity. So here in Unity we can see with the actual shader on it, the toon shader, it actually looks quite good. So I was happy enough with that. Set up the camera position in Unity itself. I know it's not the main scene, but I dotted around a couple more of this terrain just to basically give the scene some more life as we're working in 3D. Once I was happy with that, I went back into Blender, just took basically the top of the tree and decided to make it into a shrub. So I flattened that down, squished it sideways, and colored it green. And yeah, that was I was happy enough with that for the shrubs. I think they look quite nice in Unity, given their texture. Realized there was some topology issues, so just cleaned them up in Blender, re-exported them. Yeah, so I just kept messing around with basically the graphic look of the game, and I realized I had to get a couple more assets then. So I headed to the model resource to get Teddy. Teddy just needed a couple of changes just to make him look a bit nicer, a bit more like he does from the show. Some rounded ears, cleaned up his topology, brought out his legs, made his arms a little bit longer, and then fixed the texture on his ears. Once I was happy with the way that Teddy looked, I decided I had to work on the penguin then as well. So I just brought in a cube, just gave it a subsurface modifier, and then just started to work on the penguin. He's just a load of different shapes essentially, just kept molding them into place until I was ready to paint his textures. Once I had them the way I wanted, I just basically gave him a brand new texture and went into texture paint and just started painting on his face. Can we show some appreciation for this little mouth mustache? Fantastic. And once I was happy with him, I brought the both of them into Unity. Inside of Unity then, I basically just had to reconnect their textures and give them the toon shader. Easy enough. I put them in their position where they are in the show. Now, I had to set up in Blender some fight animations for Mr. Bean, as this was going to be a big part of the game, obviously. So I worked on some block, kick, punch animations, just basically some simple stuff to keep me going. Basically, I was trying to do this quick and dirty as I was doing it over the bank holiday weekend, which means I had just under 3 days by the time I started working on it. So once I was happy with the animations, I brought them back into Unity and started to make sure they looked okay in Unity itself then. And back into Blender, just cleaning up some animations. Trying to make him feel a little more like Mr. Bean, which is the actual ps2 game was lacking. And finally, I just had to set some controls for the character itself, so I could control all the kick animations, set up his character movement and his character controller, give him some random variables to make sure everything fits. Set up the code so his gravity and his movement works. Make it so he can jump. Added a plane so the ground would work correctly. And set up his animations in the animator. Then I was back in the code to make sure that all of the animations would play as we press the buttons. Once I was happy with that, I started to clean up the transitions between the animations then. Then I had to set up some kind of an enemy controller. So the first thing to do was to make it so he could be killed. So I had to make a death animation. And then once that was all connected, the enemy could die. So you can kick and punch him now at this stage. At this point, I decided to start working on the main menu. So the menu was obviously going to be the Mr. Bean scene, the very famous Mr. Bean scene of him, you know, shining the light down on Teddy. So I basically got in there and had to start designing the graphics themselves, as I didn't really want to kind of copy any low resolution stuff, although mine don't look great, as you can see. I did just use the pen tool to copy over that entire to copy over the background images, because I knew I'd be using them quite a bit. Yeah, so once I was happy with them, I brought them into Blender itself and started repositioning Teddy and Mr. Bean where I wanted. So I decided to give him this kind of almost impatient look where he's kind of tapping his foot. And I put the torch in his hand as well, and it just basically just give it this kind of life, just feel to it as though he's just waiting for the game to start, something like that. Yeah, so once I was happy, I brought that back into Unity to see how I was doing. Realized that the background needed some tweaking, so that's what I did. Fixing the UVs here. fixing the UVs, made the UVs slightly larger, and then decided to start lighting it in the game itself. So I just gave him the point light and start messing around with the lighting on the shader itself. So once I was happy enough with that, I had my Mr. Bean ready. Yeah, so I set up a play button so that would work in the main menu, and the next thing was getting the enemy to chase me. As you can see, the enemy is chasing Mr. Bean, and he's able to kill him as well, or he's able to attack at least. Next thing was to actually add some more life to the background, so I decided to design the spaceship that you see at the end of this episode. And then I decided to light up a couple of pieces, change its colors to purple, and yeah, I pretty much just called it there. Thought I was happy enough. Next thing was to export it into Unity and add on some animations. And so it was a simple animation that basically goes from left to right and then back to left. So once I had the animation, I decided to tweak it a little bit to give it more kind of a, I don't know, out of this world feel. And then it was back working on the game, so I decided to add in the suite that's in the game as well, or that's in the episode as well. The other bean has it, or Pod has the bean, or the suite basically, Mr. Bean doesn't. So that will give you health. So after I established that, I had to add in a simple health system health bar, so basically the enemy could kill Mr. Bean now, and you can collect health pieces and gain your health. Everything was good. Next thing was to add a simple death screen as well as a bean kill counter, I guess. Kill bean counter? Yeah, so just counts up every time you kill a bean, basically. And next thing I had to go in and actually start recording some audio because I couldn't find any audio clips of Mr. Bean getting hurt. So, nice little bit of Foley from myself here. Ow! 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 Perfect. And once that was done, I exported three clips there into Unity itself. Next thing was to set up some kind of wave system because I wanted to, I knew that the enemies just couldn't all spawn at the same time, so they had to be staggered, so I set up a wave system. As well as the wave system, then I also found the Mr. Bean game soundtrack from the PS2 game and decided to add that in as well because it gave it ambience. So once I was happy with that, that was it. It was game on. Basically, you just fight till you die, essentially. It becomes incredibly overwhelming. The last thing I had to do then was set up a settings menu in the main menu at the end, as well as a way to change audio as you play the game. But yeah, that was pretty much everything that I did in the span of the Sunday and the Monday of the bank holiday, and then again on the 6th I had to come back in and add in that adjustable audio settings. It was a tremendous amount of work to do in just under 3 days. And is it great? Yeah, I don't know. The fighting leaves a lot to be desired because I used the lazy fighting method. But I'm happy with it. No, but if you enjoyed it, it looks pretty cool. And yeah, I made it. So I'll leave it a link in the description so you can actually try it out for yourself. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. And be sure to subscribe so you see more of these weird games as we develop our main game. Yeah.